Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Diplomatic Academy, the Vienna School of International Studies. I'm really happy to welcome you here, and we just discussed it is incredible, this large audience just before a long weekend, so the topic must be really very, very interesting for all of you. So what if the US got Greenland? In December 2024, the President-elect of the United States, Donald Trump, reiterated his interest in the US assuming control of Greenland. He stated that for purposes of national security and freedom throughout the world, the United States of America feels that the ownership and control of Greenland is an absolute necessity. Adding later on, one way or the other, we are going to have Greenland. The fact that the US president has openly threatened a European country with the use of military force to annex European territory has led to strained transatlantic relations. For the first time in its history, a report by the Danish Defense Intelligence Service mentioned the United States as a potential threat to national security. This had many more impacts. Not only did it trigger a diplomatic crisis, it also sparked a discussion within NATO and the European Union about military security. What if a NATO member attacked another NATO member? Should NATO establish a permanent NATO mission in Greenland? It also led to broader discussions about Arctic security. Discussions about the US military base in Greenland are still ongoing. Meanwhile, the Kingdom of Denmark has begun to expand its military capabilities in the Arctic. Several NATO member states have begun deploying troops to Greenland as part of Operation Arctic Endurance. This topic also sparked a new discussion about European independence. The EU demonstrated solidarity by stating that it would not tolerate violations of international law, with European countries emphasizing that Greenland belongs to its people. It is for Denmark and Greenland, and them only, to decide on matters concerning Denmark and Greenland. The topic also has an economic impact. During his first term, President Trump asked to purchase Greenland. And the governments of Denmark and Greenland clarified that Greenland is not for sale. The US then threatened the EU with a trade war. In response, European politicians called for a proposed EU-US trade agreement to be suspended. The topic has also brought questions of international law to the forefront, such as the status of Greenland, which is not an EU member, but an autonomous Danish territory. This has revived again discussions in Greenland about its relationship with Denmark and whether they should seek independence. As an academic and educational institutions that we are here at the Diplomatic Academy, we see this as a perfect example of the interdisciplinary nature of such complex topics. It reinforces our belief that it is important to consider all of our pillars: international relations, history, economics, and international law. The discussion about Greenland also demonstrates that the Arctic has become one of the world's strategically most important regions. Climate change is accelerating the geopolitical significance of the Arctic as a trading route and making raw materials and oil more accessible. The war with Iran pushed the conflict in the Arctic into the background, but it is now back in the spotlight. This week, the US Special Envoy for Greenland participated in the Future Greenland Conference, which discussed the economics and security of Greenland and the Arctic. We are very grateful that a range of experts are gathering here today to discuss Greenland and the Arctic, as this topic provides an example for the pressure on the multilateral system, the shifting power dynamics, the geopolitical turbulences, and the fact that there are no more predictable international structures anymore. So thank you very much. Michael Zinkanell, Director of the Austrian Institute for European and Security Policy, for moderating the following discussion and for being an event partner again. And also thank you, the VIGS Institute, for picking such a wonderful topic. And now Michael Zinkanell will tell you more about the panelists, who include a member of the Inuit Circumpolar Council, as well as experts from Denmark, Finland, the UK, and the US. But first, I will hand over to Zoltan Acs, the director of the Vienna Institute for Global Studies, to deliver his opening remarks. Thank you very much.
Well, welcome to this amazing event on a topic of increasing importance for everybody. My name is Zoltan Acs. I'm the director of the Vienna Institute for Global Studies. I spent a large part of my career at George Mason University, where I'm professor emeritus at the London School of Economics and at the Hungarian Academy of Sciences. 3 years ago, Naomi and I were asked to set up an institute. And there are 10,000 institutes in the world. I said, why do we need another one? That's a great question. And they said, we'd like one that took a different approach to the world. So the Vienna Institute for Global Studies, founded in 2024, is interested in the next 25 years. So our hashtag is the next 25. These are dangerous times, as we just heard, and all of you know. And the question was, can we create a dialogue to try to make the world a better place and this transition more predictable? Let me talk about the last 25 years, and actually the last 50 years. In 1971, the future was invented in the United States, right? And three things happened. The microprocessor was invented, which drives the whole digital revolution in the digital world. Kissinger and Nixon opened up China. Maybe they should have left it sleeping, I don't know. And it was the start of the environmental movement, right, which has made the world a much cleaner, better, and more pleasant place. From 1971 to 2000, these were the good years, right? This is when the digital revolution took off. We got smartphones, laptop computers, the internet, the World Wide Web, cloud computing, things that we couldn't even think about living without today. However, the next 25 years, even though we had all this technology, were not as good, right? We started out the 2000s with the war on terror. We had a small financial crisis in 2001. We had a global financial crisis in 2008 we haven't recovered from. There was the war in Ukraine, started in 2014. The economy of the Western world did not do that well. Productivity declined, joblessness, lack of increase in living standards, so on and so forth. And then we had a pandemic that no one expected, and the only thing that didn't happen in the last 25 years was Martians coming down and visiting us. If you live long enough, everything can happen. So the Institute is interested in three topics. And I remember sitting down with a group of academics, business people, lawyers, doctors, and I said, I have a vision for this institute, and there's three things that are important. And they said, what is it? I said, first of all, technology. And everybody sort of agrees that technology is real important. How do we get it? How do we implement it? So innovation, entrepreneurship, policy, all these are real important. And AI, right? I don't have to mention that. The second part was well-being, right? What is the nature of well-being of our societies? And everybody says, yes, that is very important. And then the third one was geopolitics. How we get along and how geography interacts became important, right? In some sense, this is what motivates this. And we worked with several people. Peter Turchin at the Complexity Hub here, he's written about well-being over 4,000 years. I said, how do you know what happened 4,000 years ago? He goes, well, we don't really, but anyway, right? And then with George Friedman, the geopolitician, who's written about 3 or 4 books about the future, the next 100 years, the crucial decade. This is, for him, the crucial decade. And then, right, if you want to sort of get a handle on technology, you need to sort of understand the ecosystem that this works in. And I have spent decades working on the digital entrepreneurial ecosystem to try to understand how this is evolving in the world. And so we study 180 countries over 10 years with a whole set of variables, and we're able to sort of track how countries are doing in this digital revolution. When you ask George Friedman what's happening in the world, he says there's 2 things happening in America that are important to understand what's going on. There's an institutional cycle in America that evolves and changes every 80 years. The last one changed around 1945. And right, we all know that the U.S. global system is now in transition. And the other one, there's a socioeconomic cycle in the United States that changes like every 50 years, right? And the last one was in the 80s, and we're now in another one of these. And the 2020s are about these 2 cycles coming together, clashing, creating a crisis, and then after this decade, the U.S. enters an era of optimism, growth, and prosperity, according to George Friedman. I didn't say that because I don't know. And so where are we today? 3 things, I think, give us hope. We've gotten through the first part of this decade from 2021 to 2025, and we're into now this second half. And there are 3 things that are very optimistic, right? There was just a new report on global warming that said that the worst case scenario of 10 degrees increase by 2100 won't happen, right? Because we made enough progress in renewables and reducing the worst polluting. So the climate change is now on a more positive track. The second one is that productivity increase in the United States that was 1% from 2010 to 2020 has now jumped to 2%, 100% increase. And productivity, right, is what ultimately will determine our well-being. And the third one, which is, I think, maybe the most interesting, at the second end of these cycles, investment opportunities decline, right? We don't know where to invest capital because there are no opportunities, right? And what's happened with the AI revolution in the last 4 years, right? There's been a huge opportunity for investment, right? And all you have to do is pick up the Financial Times, and trillions of dollars are being invested in this technology, right? And in the next couple of weeks, SpaceX, OpenAI, and Anthropic are all going to do public offerings, each one raising close to $1 trillion. And so then on the geopolitical front, right, so that's where we end up here. Back in February, I was looking around. We didn't have the Iran war yet, and we had Trump's speech. And I said, wouldn't it be interesting to do something on this? And so we partnered with the Diplomatische Academy and, I gotta get this right, the Austrian Institute for Strategy. And I'd like to thank both of them and all of you for coming to hear about this fascinating development in geopolitics. Thank you very much.
Excellencies, dear colleagues, dear ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for attending tonight's event, What If the U.S. Got Greenland? Reflections on NATO, European Security, International Law, and the Arctic Future. Special thanks, of course, to our co-hosts for tonight, Ambassador Martin Eichtinger, Director from the Vienna School of International Studies, and Zoltan Acs, the Director of the Vienna Institute for Global Studies. So it's a great pleasure to collaborate with both of you. Thank you very much that we can organize this event here at the Diplomatic Academy, the Vienna School for International Studies. As we heard already from Ambassador Eichtinger in the introduction, the Arctic is indeed becoming an increasingly important role, an important geopolitical player. There is massive industrial, logistical, and geopolitical development happening in the entire Arctic space as we speak. The Arctic contains undiscovered oil and gas reserves, critical raw materials, and has the ability to open up newly accessible shipping routes that are emerging. Also, the security reality of the Arctic is hardening with Russia's military buildup, with NATO's expansion in the north. The Arctic is becoming a key theater for deterrence and for influence in the future and in the present. And the escalation point in early 2026, late 25, as Ambassador Eichtinger has mentioned, the Greenland crisis was, of course, a tipping point, an escalation point, when Trump suggested to coercively and aggressively acquire the territory of Greenland, of the self-governing island within the Kingdom of Denmark, with roughly 56,000 inhabitants. And Greenland is therefore caught in this Arctic race, its strategic location, also its untapped resources, the relevance for climate change, has significant security implications and security policy implications for the island. The statements made by Trump do not only disrupt the transatlantic relations, but they also have propelled Greenland from the periphery to the center of European strategic thinking and Europe's strategic ambitions. And therefore, it resembles a stress test for the European Union, a stress test also for the transatlantic relationship and partnership. And therefore, this topic is extremely relevant, and I'm happy that we can cover it in this distinguished panel discussion today. Starting with our keynote speaker, Kenneth Rosen from the United States. He will be joining online. Kenneth is an independent journalist and war correspondent. He has reported from over 24 countries on the impact of geopolitical conflict and also the impact that it had on the hardship of individual lives. He is author to several books. His most recent book, Polar War, Submarines, Spies, and the Struggle for Power in the Melting Arctic, is available outside. Kenneth, I know that you're with us online, but you cannot see that in person, that we have a small book stand, so also the audience can buy your book and read it if they're interested. In this book, Kenneth is revealing how climate change ambitions, how military ambitions are transforming the Arctic into the epicenter for a new Cold War. Thank you very much, Kenneth, for being with us, for giving that keynote speech on focusing on the US perspective, but also to giving us some insights in the Greenland factor of the current US-American national security discourse. Thank you very much, Kenneth.
Thank you all, and good evening, guten Abend, and thank you to the Vienna Institute for Global Studies for inviting me to give this keynote speech, for which, of course, I'm sadly unable to be present. I'm grateful to the many of you who are participating in what will assuredly be an engaging conversation this evening. The Arctic regions have played a large part in my life, first as a young journalist working for Alaska's capital newspaper, and then again over the course of 3 years as I wrote and reported my latest book, Polar War. The book is broadly about the dual impacts of geopolitics in the far north, and specifically about the military units gearing up for what some American and European officials have told me is a, quote, new Cold War. My hope this evening and for the next 10 to 15 minutes is to lay the foundation for a more rigorous inquiry into tonight's topic, which, as you well know, is what if the U.S. got Greenland? So let us start by doing away with the notion that the Arctic is merely a place of polar bears, snow, and ice. Anyone who has lived in Alaska or anywhere in the far north knows that there is much more than that when it comes to the vast circumpolar cosmos crowning the northern hemisphere. What even is the Arctic, right? There's little dispute that the Arctic is a dark, literal, and figurative place, but its definition is precisely illusory, and even the exact latitude at which the region begins is not wholly agreed upon. The Arctic may be divided by latitude into two regions: the Arctic proper, population 4 million, and the subarctic, population 13 million. This offers a loose definition of the Arctic, since there is no formal definition, as you'll see, but it's far from the only one. The people who work, live, and study there define it differently and for different reasons, resulting in definitions as varied as the land and seas across the circumpolar north. Some choose to define the Arctic as the only thing above the Arctic Circle at 66 degrees and 33 minutes north, delineating where you may see the midnight sun during the summer solstice and 24 hours of darkness during the winter solstice. Some may say the Arctic begins where the taiga, Russian for the land of little sticks, and the world's largest land biome, also known as the boreal forest, ends, and where steppes become tundra. But the boreal's boundaries are moving. Smaller growth trees creak and creep and crawl northward as our planet warms. Others may say the Arctic begins where there is permafrost, that layer of frozen substrate. Others still may point to median annual, monthly, or daily temperatures. Yet the planet tilts irregularly, as we know, and impedes the precision of solstices and equinoxes. Permafrost is spotty even in the areas of the high north, and average temperatures swing like a pendulum. Thermometers across the Canadian Arctic might not reach below minus 51 degrees Fahrenheit, while in Siberia, lows of minus 80 degrees are typical. Each Arctic nation therefore has its own definition of their territory's boundaries. Iceland itself is an Arctic state, despite being a small island just shy of the Arctic Circle. The word Arctic derives from the Greek word for bear, and the name Antarctica reminds us that no bear inhabits that southern continent. So when the last of the polar bears die, then I suppose the name Arctic will merely become an honorific, in memorial to a world in perpetual flux. Given the trouble of defining the region, we can assume there is much to disagree on in the high north. But before we get there, we can say that there is one thing that is agreed upon the world over, one even the current administration in Washington, D.C. cannot shy away from. That is that the climate is changing. The planet is heating. This is most obvious in the Arctic Ocean, where the temperatures annually warm 5 times faster than the rest of the planet. Each year, the planet permanently loses a section of sea ice the size of Nebraska. Along with it, the reflective properties of that snow and ice, which will no longer return heat back into the atmosphere. The Arctic Ocean sees new summer minimum ice extent records annually, advancing a downward trend of 12.5% per decade since 1979. When the Arctic Ocean sea ice, which one can imagine as a gyrating glacier at the top of the world, melts, this does not increase sea levels any more than a melting ice cube would cause your drink to overflow, though Greenland's ice cap is another story. Yet as the ice melts, more of the ocean is exposed, and more exposed deep blue water acts as a sink into which this excess heat of the sun swirls. The warm water sets in motion what scientists call a feedback loop. The excess heat dries up coral reefs, alters marine chemistry, and can upend the thermaline circulation, that process by which salt and water temperatures are dispersed throughout the world's oceans. And one of the ways that we can anticipate warmer climes in Norway as opposed to elsewhere in Europe. Summers last longer, winters are shorter. A slowing of the circulation, which is sometimes known as the ocean conveyor belt, could have unforeseen consequences for our climate. An increase in warm water from the sun's heat is just as challenging to the health of the planet as an increase of cold water from melting glaciers. To put this into perspective, the last time a rapid influx of cold water was introduced into that conveyor flowing between the world's 5 oceans, global temperatures plunged humanity into an ice age. But there is much politicking around the climate and its health. which is why I wanted to understand beyond the climate narratives what this meant for the United States and its foreign partners. Debating whether climate change was real is beside the point when nations have taken this warning, this warming, this melting of the far north as not a reason to act on sustaining the current climate of lowering gas and fuel emissions, of curbing what climate scientists call our ascent toward a point of no return, despite what we heard earlier. Instead, governments, including Washington, have used this evidence to race for the resources the ice and cold and snow have hidden for thousands of years. The Russian Federation themselves noticed the upside of climate change early. It began reopening Cold War era bases along its many thousands of miles of Arctic Ocean coastline. It resumed weapons testing on its Arctic islands, developing the hypersonic missiles which devastate communities across Ukraine today. It built out its icebreaker fleet, now surpassing more than 50 vessels, in the aim of opening alongside its partner, the People's Republic of China, what it is being called the Polar Silk Road. Those two nations were amassing resources and military capabilities in the north. Meanwhile, the U.S. could not seem to maintain even its one icebreaker operating in the region. So though the U.S. has more recently sought to build and purchase more ice-worthy vessels, its military capabilities in the north run far deeper. Failings in domain awareness, communications, and logistics are pervasive during an exercise that I experienced alongside American soldiers. North American aerospace defense infrastructure is, as one commander told me, held together by chicken wire and a prayer. To treat trench foot and frostbite, as I witnessed, U.S. Army medics had to devise a homemade solution, sous vide machines inside 5-gallon buckets. The situation is no better at America's northernmost base in Greenland, where the runways are frequently cracked and unmaintained, pressures exerted by the thawing permafrost and frigid temperatures of the north. So when President Trump demands Greenland for the U.S., it is the realization that even if the U.S. were to attempt to take over the Arctic island, it would end all without certainty, or perhaps unwillingly, to maintain its hold on that very Arctic island. Greenland's struggles for independence is not only cultural or economic, it's strategic. In 2025, when President Trump declared that we need Greenland for national security purposes, he echoed a lineage of imperial designs. But Greenland is already integral to U.S. defense through Denmark, a NATO partner, and Pacific Space Base, the American outpost at the northern edge of the island, which was enabled by one renegade diplomat. In 1941, Heinrich Kaufmann, Denmark's ambassador to the U.S., defied his Nazi-occupied government. He declared that Denmark was under duress and therefore unable to govern its overseas colonies. Acting unilaterally, he signed an agreement in the name of the king, transferring control of Greenland to the United States. He used Denmark's US-based gold reserves to fund Danish embassies across the Americas and Middle East. The move allowed the Allies to build Arctic bases and weather stations, helping to shape the outcome of the Second World War. Kaufmann's agreement laid the foundation for what would become a permanent U.S. military presence. Greenland's role in Western defense is not new. What is new is the language of ownership and transaction. We don't want America to play an oversized role, one Danish diplomat told me while I was in Copenhagen, but we want all of our allies to bring Greenland to the West. Today, interest in Greenland stems not only from geography, but from geology, rare earth elements, minerals, uranium, Chinese-backed projects like two mines that were eventually shuttered, and Americans' interests crowded them out. A more forceful push by Trump's State Department could unhinge the legacy of American cooperation and alignment with Greenland and Denmark. Trump's renewed interest in Greenland was met with firm resistance from the former Danish Prime Minister, who emphasized that Greenland is not for sale and called for a united European response to any U.S. pressure. The Trump administration planned to offer financial incentives to Greenlanders, proposing annual payments of $10,000 per resident to replace Denmark's annual subsidy. Plans were announced to use social media to mimic the tactics of authoritarian countries seeking to sway the local populace. Vice President J.D. Vance visited Greenland to assert the U.S. protection would be better and better serve Greenland's security needs, especially against potential threats from Russia and China. Though the vice president failed to note that Greenland's security needs were already served by America. The Greenlandic public and Danish officials so roundly shunned the idea of a visit from anyone tied to the Trump administration that officials would only safely visit Pacific to give their stump speeches. The flurry of that activity in and around Greenland reminded me the lesson of Jantloven, a social attitude of disapproval towards expressions of individuality and personal success, which the Danish failed to heed and which has cost them dearly in Greenland, was also being ignored by American officials. History, or even a modest understanding of the ways by which nations' interests dovetail today, was never Trump's strong suit. A real and very dangerous naivety persists in the Trump administration's approach to Greenland and the Arctic broadly. When President Trump introduced the idea of purchasing Greenland once during his first term, twice leading up to his second term, then most recently in January and February, the statements seem remarkably illiterate with respect to the history of America's feeble presence in the Arctic, and furthermore, ignorant of how quickly that presence can become unwelcome. It also illustrated the stubborn myth that the Arctic can be claimed by anyone under the right circumstances, that the region was somehow detached from international laws and norms, demonstrating a complete ignobleness toward ontological security in the region. Before Trump, the United States had no fewer than on 3 occasions, dating back to at least 1867, discussed the idea of purchasing Greenland and Iceland, with the Kingdom of Denmark shutting down the idea each time. In 1975, C.L. Sulzberger, the New York Times Pulitzer Prize-winning foreign correspondent and newspaper heir, wrote that, quote, Greenland must be regarded as coveted by the Monroe Doctrine. The Arctic island nation has remained in the American security perimeter firmly ever since. It is already an American partner in all the ways that matter. Threatening takeovers in the Arctic, suggesting that the region is a place for outright military conflict, is what has historically deadened cooperation in these high latitudes. Quote, it was a pretty dark message about the Arctic, the expectations of conflict, unquote, one senior State Department official told me. The official was recalling when Trump's first Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, derided China and Russia in 2019 for their increasingly crude ambitions toward Arctic dominance, which included funding infrastructure projects for dual-use military and scientific purposes, or outright building military bases. It was around this time that Trump first sought to buy Greenland. Quote, it failed to take account of what was going well and to convey a more optimistic, positive message. What you can change can be self-fulfilling, unquote, the State Department official said. The Arctic Council was not a place where armed conflict would break out, the official told me. It was a mutual place where rule would be followed, but those calculations have changed. Our ambitions were that if there was a conflict between Russia and the U.S., it was more likely to start elsewhere and then spread to the Arctic, the senior official told me, adding that in all internal discussions of the Arctic in the State Department, until recently they seemed afar, elsewhere, over the horizon, and never at home, no matter who sat in the Oval Office. And the State Department was guilty of this. It automatically thought that Europe, not the American Arctic, was what was at stake. So one could be forgiven for thinking tensions in the Arctic, perhaps most prominently embodied by President Trump's egregious campaign to, quote, get and secure Greenland as another American territory, came out of nowhere. But as you'll learn tonight, it did not. Historically, the American desire to control Greenland has existed nearly as long as America itself. It was not Trump's rhetoric of a takeover that struck me during my years spent traveling and reporting on the Circumpolar North. It was the ineptitude surrounding the idea. So to publicly make threats of invading Greenland while America continually fails by all metrics in the Arctic, at home and abroad, seemed anathema to our own desires and lacking abilities across the region. Tonight's discussion therefore comes at a time when there are more questions than answers for the future of the American and global Arctics alike. Though I will now step aside as the conversation gets underway, I believe its modest aim is to more fully comprehend what some have called this new Cold War, its history, its future, and what's at stake for everyone, whether they reside below or above that invisible circle separating snow and ice from the rest of the world. To those of us who have been watching the Arctic over the last half decade or so, the possibility of conflict in the Arctic now feels inevitable, though we must work to prevent further conflict. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kenneth, Rosen, for joining us online and for giving us this great introduction in terms of your keynote, of reminding us especially of the historic past, of this trajectory that the US-American ambitions to acquire, to buy Greenland date back centuries, and that now is a crucial time in history. So thank you very much again for your contribution. Dear ladies and gentlemen, we will start now with the panel discussion, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome three excellent speakers to join me tonight and to give their statements, to give their contributions to this discussion. Please, to all the speakers, join me while I introduce you. We will start with Kathrine Bødker from Greenland, or as it would be called in the traditional Greenlandic language, I hope I do pronounce it correctly, Kalalit Nunat. Kalalit Nunat. Okay, I will certainly practice a little bit more. Kathrine, you are an Inuit leader and activist from Greenland. You have been born and raised in Greenland, serving as the executive member of the Inuit Circumpolar Council, the Kalalit Nunat, the ICC Greenland. The ICC is an NGO and an indigenous peoples organization representing roughly 180,000 Inuit and Yupik people from Canada, from the U.S., from Greenland, and from Russia. You have spent more than 2 decades engaging before you became an advocate, an activist for indigenous rights, been engaging also in advocacy for women's rights, and currently you represent the Greenlandic Inuit interests in the wider Arctic, in forums including the Arctic Forum, including topics like the Arctic geopolitical situation. Thank you very much for joining us from Nuuk. I think you had the longest travel to Austria. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
From Denmark is joining Dr. Jens Wendel-Hansen, historian and senior researcher at the Aarhus University, the Center for Grundtvig Studies. Jens, your special focus lies on 19th century political history, democracy, but also, most importantly for tonight's discussion, Greenland's history. You have held various academic positions in your previous professional lives at the University of Copenhagen, at the University of South Denmark, but also at the University in Greenland. And your research examines how constructural democratic ideas are shaping the Danish and the Greenlandic history and the societies, and how this change of perception, how this change of ideas is also present today and is shaping the current situation and position between Greenland and Denmark. Thank you very much for joining us. Our third speaker for tonight is Professor Emeritus Lassi Heininen from Finland. You are a Finnish political scientist and professor at Arctic politics. You are a leading expert in Arctic geopolitical and security and environmental politics and policies, currently active as a visiting researcher and an adjunct professor in Arctic and geopolitical studies. You have authored more than 300 academic publications. Recent volumes that you have co-authored include topics on the Arctic security and related to the Arctic strategies. Thank you very much, Lassi, also for joining us. And unfortunately, Dr. Caroline Kennedy-Pipe, who has also been announced in the program, cannot join due to some unforeseen health circumstances. She is sending all her best regards to you and is unfortunately not able to join. However, we will definitely make the best out of the next 1 hour approximately. I would very much encourage you to share your perspectives, to share your ideas, to also have indeed an interactive discussion amongst yourselves and of course also with the audience, who we invite to also raise some questions towards the end. Kathrine, I would like to start with you. Probably you can give us your perspectives coming from Greenland, being an activist for Greenland, for indigenous rights, especially reflecting also what we have heard from Kenneth.
Yes.
So thank you very much again for being with us. I'm looking forward to
Thank
your
you.
contribution.
Thank you. Yes. I was very happy with his last sentence that we should work for a peaceful ending of this. But so my perspective is that we have to remember that Greenland is not just a brick of ice. Greenland is not just a place with snow. It is a home. And now I'm getting touched. It is a home where we have lived for thousands of years. And so just remember to talk about it as not just something that is owned or run by Denmark. We have a collaboration with Denmark now. Of course, yes, there's a colonial history, but it is a home and we have our own jurisdiction. And what we are fighting for is the self-determination. So when people, especially from outside of our jurisdiction, outside of our kingdom, outside of our region, talks about buying us or owning us or controlling us, it is very devaluating. Yes.
Thank you for reminding us of that important and often forgotten factor that in geopolitics or in security, we often forget that the regions, the cities, the countries that we do talk about are also home to people. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Jens, since you're from Denmark, you're coming from Denmark, but you have also taught, as I mentioned briefly, at the University of Greenland. Probably you can also give us your perspectives, especially from your historic analysis and historic expertise. How has the relationship shifted over the last decades?
Yes, Greenland is an autonomous government element of the Kingdom of Denmark. It is integrated and has members since 1953, members in the Danish Parliament, as well as their own parliament, and since 53, which was a formal decolonization, where Greenland. Yeah, sorry. I've forgotten to. Yeah. Since 1953, in 1953, Greenland was erected to a county within the Kingdom of Denmark, and since then it has developed home rule and now self-government. So therefore, there are a huge amount of resource which can be taken over from Greenland. What is therefore also from a Danish point of view frustrating, I think, is the correct answer, is both the sympathy that we, of course, as a small country, has in regard to an even smaller country, if you cannot depend on your allies. That is terrible and a fundamental breach with how things are working. But also from a historic point of view, the sovereignty of the Danish sovereignty of Greenland has not been questioned by the U.S. before now, and that is hugely problematic if we are throwing away the recognized sovereignties of countries. Mm-hmm. Apart from this, there's also that the arguments posed by Donald Trump, there has been two, that is, it is needed for security, and there's the question about the national resources. I think that he put it like that Greenland were not allowed, or it was not possible for Greenland to exploit the national resources, and that is not. Neither of those are valid points, because from a security point of view, the defense of Greenland is a shared Danish and American responsibility. That has been so since 1941, and is stated so as in the Defense Treaty from 1951. And with regard to the natural resources, then the natural resources resort lies with Greenland. There's only in one question that it is a Danish or a kingdom issue, and that is if it has security implications. For instance, with radioactive elements and so on, because that has to do with foreign affairs and security policy and so on. But in this regard, it is actually very, very hard to understand the aspirations of the present American administration, because it is they are not valid, and that they are weakening the security that small countries have to rely on in such a world as we live in. Is that a sufficient answer?
Absolutely, for now.
Yeah, for now, yeah.
I think you made some extremely relevant and important points. We can dive into some elements. I've taken some notes for further follow questions.
Yes.
But for now, absolutely sufficient. Lassi, you're coming from Finland. You're an expert also on Arctic security, on the geopolitical relevance of the Arctic. How do you assess the current situation, especially since the beginning of 2026 with this escalation in the rhetoric?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for inviting me. It's nice to be in Vienna. Nice weather, warm weather. And I appreciate you.
Yes, it's very warm.
Spending your Friday early evening here. I mean, exactly coming not from the Kingdom of Denmark, like my colleagues here. So I can maybe have a little bit broader perspective coming from that, my studies, what I have done in the last, 40 years. And I still promise I will make that number of my publications a little bit bigger still.
Wonderful.
I'm still active researcher, first of all. But let me put this way. I mean, I understand that this is a little bit unorthodox approach. Listening today, and of course, few other, and what is going on. So think about the Arctic region 40 years ago, mid-1980s. It was the end of the Cold War. There was a lot of military political competition between the USA and the Soviet Union dealing with the Arctic. There were very heavy nuclear weapon structures from both sides deployed in the very region. There were several nuclear submarines hiding there under the sea ice of the Arctic Ocean, etc. So at that time, we were thinking that, yeah, there is real military tension. And the ultimate aim of the Arctic states, of course, you have studied it very well, that you know which are the 8 Arctic states. So they, in a way, became concerned because of pollution, long-range pollution, radioactivity coming from lower latitudes. So the Arctic Ocean started to become a sink of pollutants. It was not really yet there, but all the scientists said, doing research on that, saying that it will come soon if we will not do anything for that. And then they started cooperation on environmental protection. Very simple, that. And so the ultimate aim was to decrease military tension, increase political stability. And now, 40 years later, the Arctic is one of the most peaceful regions in the world. In spite of all rumors and media headlines, etc. No, I mean, this 40 years has been a success story. I mean, how many armed conflicts you have had in the Arctic after the beginning of the war in Ukraine? Within the last 4.5 years, how many? You might guess. 0, none. So the last military conflict in the Arctic was in the Second World War. So not since that. And you have had several hot wars in Europe, even before the Ukraine war, in Balkans. So I mean, this is the perspective. So the Arctic is exactly the right place where we can have and continue cooperation for environmental protection and climate change mitigation. But of course, only one thing is missing: political will to do that. And we are working hard, researchers, scientists, in order to implement freedom of science. But then governments are not so happy with that. So this is our and my interpretation of the geopolitics of the Arctic today.
Yeah, thank you. Kathrine, I have a question specifically for you, because you kindly mentioned that Greenland is also a home to the people, to your people. Can you probably give us a little bit more insight in what the ICC does, in what your role is also for the de-escalation of the current tensions?
Yes.
In addition to giving us also some perspectives of the reaction of the local community, the reaction of the indigenous community, that is, by the way, if I remember correctly, percentage-wise, the largest of all Arctic states in Greenland, the representation of the indigenous community.
Yes. So Greenland, or Kalaallit, as we call it in Greenlandic, Kalaallit, is inhabited by 57,000 people, and at least 50,000 of us are Inuit people. I think we talked about yesterday that about 17,000 Greenlandic people, Inuit people, born and raised in Greenland, live in Denmark. I guess it's the highest number of Inuit people living outside of the Arctic. But Greenland, yes, we have our own jurisdiction. We have our, as Jens said, self-government, and we have had that since 2009. Before that, we had our own home rule since 1979, and before that, we had our own national. It was called Landsråd, the national council. They didn't make laws, but they would anbefale. Suggest topics to in which areas that the Danish Parliament would make the laws in Greenland. So we have had influence on our own country's development since 1908, at least since we were colonized, if you can say that. And yes, we have been living in peace. Actually, we usually tell people that tell around the world that Greenland has never been in a war. We have never been in wars. So that is very foreign to us to be aggressive in that way. The Greenlandic or Inuit way of life is that it is society first, and that the society takes care of the individual. So this whole concept about individualism and getting rich on something is something that is very foreign to us as culture. And yes, as you say, that the Inuit live among 4 different states because the Inuit people have been colonized by 4 different states. So we call them the false borders between the Inuit people. So the Inuit people live in Greenland, about 50,000, and then around 50 to 70,000 people, Inuit people live in Canada. And I don't even remember the exact number of Inuit people living in Alaska. And then there was about 2,000 or 3,000 Inuit people living in Chukotka, which is the most, the part closest to the United States, to Alaska. So yes, the Inuit people are spread around that side of the Arctic in the Northern Hemisphere, yes. And what more did you want me to elaborate?
How did the people of Greenland react to the current circumstances, to the tensions, so especially the indigenous, the Inuit communities?
Yeah. So the ICC was founded back in 1977. It was back in 1973, actually in Copenhagen, there was an Arctic People Conference, and Inuit people from all the Arctic, and the Sami people from Finland also, and other indigenous Arctic people gathered in Copenhagen to have a conference, and in at that time the Inuit people discovered that we can actually understand each other. We had been separated for so long, and our relationships had been divided by these borders that we didn't choose. So ICC was founded back in 1977 and has been running since then. And it is a council. Yes, it is not a jurisdiction, but it is a council that works to enhance the collaboration and relationship between the Inuit people in the whole area. I cannot speak of the reactions to this U.S. administration wanted to annex Greenland, but I can tell you that the Inuit societies from everywhere has been sending greetings and support to Greenland, the Greenlandic people and the Greenlandic government, and especially within the ICC. So the reactions have been, on a personal level, been very strong, and they very much oppose it. Mm-hmm. Yes, mm-hmm. Yes.
If I may ask, maybe a slightly critical follow-up question: are there any elements in the society of Greenland that you know of that would support a U.S. annexation?
Not an annexation, no. But I know that there are Greenlandic people that works to have a closer relationship with also the current administration, but people not only in the administration but also companies and other entities outside of the central administration. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Could I add? I think there was made an opinion poll regarding whether the Greenlandic people wanted to be a part of America, and I think it was 86% who clearly stated that they would not. How you should interpret the rest of the 14, I don't know. But so it's a very large majority, which, in my interpretation, does not feel any wish to.
Yeah, and to support that, the Greenlandic government has stated that it chooses to be within the Kingdom of Denmark. It chooses to be in the NATO alliance. It chooses the relationships we have already to the EU.
Yeah. Jens, if I can also pose a follow-up question to you. We talked a little bit about the sovereignty aspect already, but I would love to go a little bit deeper also when it comes to the implications on international law. Yeah? Yeah. If the US would indeed aggressively annex or overtake Greenland, that would of course constitute as a violation of international law. Yet at the same time, we know that the current administration didn't really care about the international law when it operated in Venezuela or also now in Iran. But from your expertise, from your perspective, what would it mean, what would it constitute of the future of the international law if there is indeed a forceful and aggressive annexation?
It will in reality mean that what has been the basis of anyway a large portion of European nations' welfare and well-being for the past since the Second World War is effectively over, because if you cannot count on international law and respect of sovereignty and respect of also popular self-determination, then what Europe has been based on since, in some cases, the First World War, in some cases the Second World War, is very much at risk. But from my point of view, I also see it like this, that I read an article published by the BBC, which stated that it seemed that the Americans are continuously putting the matter of sovereignty over smaller elements of Greenland on the table in the ongoing negotiations. And if this is right, and even more, if this actually turns up being a serious part of some kind of negotiation, then the problem is already there, because then that has been done by threat and without respect of the self-determination of the people living there, and that I actually think is the groundbreaking. International law is a formalization of this, but if there is not the decency and respect between the different nations in order to in order to accept that self-determination is important and sovereignty is a red line, then we are already there. Then we are already in risky business.
In an international environment where the rule of law, where international law is not active anymore, or is not counting for anything.
That has to be worst for the smaller countries. The last 100 years development of international courts and international law and decisions on ground of arbitration and so on that is that is seriously at risk.
Because some sort of the rule of the jungle would then take over the actual rule of law. Okay. Lassi, I would love to hear also your perspectives when it comes to the implications such a scenario would have, not only on the transatlantic relationship on a political level, but also on NATO. Now, Finland and Sweden, as the latest addition to NATO, I suppose that you have a very clear interest in also keeping this alliance that you just joined alive and on a eye-to-eye level. But what would be, in your perspective, the implications on NATO if such an aggression from one NATO country to another NATO country would indeed materialize?
I don't know, do you want to have my opinion or the opinion of the government of Finland?
Probably a little bit of both.
Well, of course, the government and those who were pro-NATO, which was, by the way, a small minority for decades. Of course, they are not so happy. So that finally Finland and Sweden are in, then there is danger of fragmentation of NATO. And NATO has already lost a big part of its credibility. And so and then that you cannot trust the strongest ally member of NATO. It is of course a very, very bad thing if this kind of allianceship or this kind of coalition building is the point. But I mean, to me, when I read international relations today and world politics, it's less and less actually. There are more these kind of looser coalitions or cooperative frameworks. And the Arctic Council is actually an example of this kind of loose cooperative framework. And it's more flexible. And there you can do many things together at the same time when you don't totally agree with others. And that's very important. And to me, like I said, I mean, being young researcher, when in the end of the Cold War, it was lesson to learn. Remember that the first stage is to agree that we disagree. It's a starting point. And that happened. And then you start to build and find out common ground. And so on. So I think Finland and Sweden are in a bad position because, particularly Finland, think about Finland, like Austria. I mean, Finland was not anymore neutral after we joined the European Union, but militarily non-aligned. We had several open doors, which we are in a way options to do other things. But now I'm afraid that we have closed many of those doors, and it's not good. And I think that and the discussion has already started, by the way, that actually there are other ways to do things. And first of all, that we should reopen the channels and to discuss with Russia. I mean, Finland closed all the border crossing points between Finland and Russia. And it's only about 300 kilometers long joint border. Yeah, so they closed off. Estonia, it's about 150 kilometers. They have still 3 open all the time during the war. And I mean, they have to go back and said, okay, let's have a restart and think about that. But of course, they will still be member state, NATO member states. But then comes more problematic, and that is dealing with the position of Greenland and what my colleague said earlier, that I mean, Finland and Sweden also signed defense cooperation agreement with the USA. And it will give permission to the USA to establish 15 military bases within Finland. And Finnish authorities do not know what the USA will bring, what kind of weapons they will bring in. And now the hot debate is that the government would like to have that Finland will change the nuclear energy law, which says now that it is forbidden to bring nuclear weapons and store nuclear weapons within the territory of Finland. And I mean, whoever is that next door, think about that. If you don't know what there is uncertainty, growing uncertainty, aren't you prepared for that? Particularly if you think that, okay, they might bring nuclear weapons there, just next door. And so this is really dangerous game. Don't do this. And I mean, not all, but most of the experts, we try to say, don't do this. Be very, very careful. But then the problem in politics in general is that if the policymakers don't listen, they ask us researchers, yeah, you have to solve this and this problem. But then when we try to prevent something, then they don't listen. Well, maybe some ones, but not all. And so yeah, this is really problematic to Finland. And I was exactly thinking that what the current U.S. administration and President Trump personally is doing now dealing with Greenland, it is not only breaking international law, but it is breaking the principle, the idea, the agreement that Arctic cooperation means that you respect state sovereignty. Even China respects the state sovereignty of the Arctic states. And so then you expect that another Arctic state would respect sovereignty of another. And so I would say this is really a bad thing, because then it will break everything, what we have tried to build.
Of course, that mutual respect for sovereignty, for statehood is a given and a fundamental element in international politics. Without that, as you said, the whole system might crumble, the whole international system.
Yeah,
that rule doesn't apply anymore.
Absolutely, because international law is not something that, okay, you can veto and say that, no, it's based on mutual respect and it's based on that, yeah, I mean, we have certain trust to others, but that is a long way to go. And it's not that simple happening, but you can do it. And the point here is that the Arctic cooperation has showed that we have done it already once.
Excellent. Yeah. Kathrine, we have mentioned already critical raw materials. At the moment, if I have done my research correctly, mining only constitutes to roughly 1% of the GDP of Greenland. The potential would be there, but lies, of course, underneath often a thick ice layer. Are there any ambitions that you can share with us that you know of to expand the extraction of these critical raw materials? And if yes, in collaboration with whom?
Yes, I was at another conference back in November 2025 in Copenhagen, and the minister was there from the Greenlandic government, was also there, and she told that they had several applications for starting mining, and I know personally, because I'm married to one that is the director, a CEO of one of the mining companies. So there are mining companies that are planning on starting and already have the licenses to mine down in South Greenland. I know that potential is very big, but yes, a lot of it is under ice, but not all of it. But even the potentials that are not covered by the inland ice, they have to make all the infrastructure to get there. So the investments are very high, and therefore finding the finances to get started and be in production are very high. But there are mining projects that have the license to operate already, not only license to search, but license to operate. So the potential of the mining industry in Greenland increasing is there. Yes, yes.
But those are local companies that have received the license? No. Or are they foreign companies?
They are. They have made, and I'm not part of the government, so I cannot speak 100% as the lawmakers, but the laws in Greenland has put together that they have to be a Greenlandic registered company, so the owners do not need to be local, but they have to be locally registered. So the investors are from many places around the world.
But I actually think that. I actually think that there were American investors included in certain of the negotiations this autumn in 2025, and even that shows that the argument is not valid, because you can negotiate with the Greenlandic self-government as an American investor in order to exploit the natural resources. So, there are no problem.
And also, lately, the Prime Minister of Greenland has stated that even though we are not for sale, we do not want to stop any dialogues, and we are open for business. So foreign investors are welcome to come and explore and start the mining projects. Yes. So it's not that the Greenlandic government prohibits the foreign investments, and not the American either. So they are welcome to collaborate.
I would like to move also the discussion a little bit towards the topic of European security and defense. Both you, Lassi and Jens, probably to both of you. Of course, Kathrine, also if you want to comment on that. The buzzwords that we hear in that regard are often strategic autonomy, strategic enablers, the development of some strategic military capabilities and capacities for Europe and European states. In terms of Greenland, this whole discourse, the whole crisis has also charged the discussion within Europe that has been already going on for more strategic autonomy, for more ability to defend oneself. From the Finnish side, where do you see currently the development moving, especially with regards also to a potential Greenland scenario?
Yeah, I find that difficult to answer. But also there were a lot of difficult words in what you just said. I'm just an historian. No, but anyway, if you're looking you in accordance with the European strategy and so on, I think that one of the things that probably surprised me the most of this of this is actually how much the European countries agree on that sovereignty and self determination is a red line. That I don't think I have counted on that in this degree, that there were no actual discussion. It was just everyone agreed that this was not This was not so, and therefore I think that also that that you have to find a European strategy. There are no questions about that, because seemingly there are not the possibility of arbitration with the other side. So therefore, you have to find some kind of way to be self-bearing in this in this regard. Mm-hmm. So a European strategy is a necessity, not what do you call it? Not convenient, but a necessity.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a very important question issue to think. You mentioned strategic autonomy. That is, of course, a key word. But I mean, it's rather much to promise, and it doesn't mean anything if you don't implement it. And of course, here in the European context, it means not to be dependent on the USA militarily. But then, of course, at the same time, I mean, we are originally few European states who joined NATO rather soon after the end of the Second World War, and from the very beginning, it was clear that NATO is for the national security of the USA. It's not the other way around. But that was the beginning of the Cold War, and many issues that the Soviet Union is going to conquer the rest of Europe, etc., etc. Was that really the aim? It's another issue. There are many historians who are saying that no, and actually the Soviet Union was rather weak at the time. I mean, think about the war, 4 years. And how many people died? I mean, in Russia or in the Soviet Union, Russia and Ukraine in the war, not only in the western part of Europe, but more there, etc. So was that credible really? I'm not sure. Was that really? But however, it happened, and they built that, and then. If you noticed a few weeks ago when there was this saying by President Trump that we will decrease troops from Germany, as a response to what Chancellor Merz said. I mean, but still there are rather many American soldiers in Germany. But then I said, oh yeah, I mean, why? Why they are there? I mean, they have been there since the end of the Second World War, first in West Germany and now in Germany. And I was wondering, why? Is Germany occupied? Is Germany really sovereign state? Of course, we used to say it is, but is it? If in Finland we would have Russian troops after the war, when we jumped out from the Second World War, in September 1944. If there, I mean, Helsinki was never occupied, by the way, never, and so we had German troops, but we didn't never have Russian troops. But if we would have, then of course the interpretation would be that Finland is not sovereign state. I mean, be logical with the definitions. And so I'm really wondering, I mean, can European state have strategic autonomy so long there are foreign troops in this country? It's not only Germany, it's Italy, UK, Belgium, and so on. And so these are really difficult questions. Who are the policymakers in European Union states or NATO European states who are really putting that to be discussed? You need courage, personal courage to do that, and so on. And that's why this is not going to be a credible effort if you really aim to have strategic autonomy. But if it is more that kind of rhetoric, then it's another issue then, okay, fine. People don't know the details. And then if experts who are trying to explain will not have floors to express their opinions. And I have to say, this is the case in several European states today, like also in the Nordic countries, Finland and Sweden. I mean, media is not interviewing. Media does not want to have these voices. And so on. It's not easy at all. There is too much manipulation. Of course, I should not say propaganda, but what is the difference between manipulation and propaganda? I don't know, I leave it to you. But it's manipulation, absolutely, it's manipulation. And so I would like to see beginning of strategic autonomy of Europe by opening the doors, well, not doors, but opening the connections and to discuss with Russia. Why that is given that duty to the U.S. president? Why U.S. president is negotiating on behalf of Europe? It's not good. It's not a strategic autonomy. I mean, but again, who is that European leader who is saying that European Union should start talks with Russia? I mean, President Macron was doing that, trying to do that earlier, but again, I mean, he could do that again. And I think that it will come soon, but I don't know yet who will start that.
Of course, those are tricky and difficult questions, and probably not always the popular opinion that is shared currently with policymakers across Europe. I just want to challenge you on one element that you mentioned when it comes to the foreign troops on Germany or other EU member states. I mean, I think we have to differentiate a little bit, because Germany is part of the European Union, is part of NATO. This alliance allows for the positioning of also foreign troops without infringing the sovereignty of that one state. Because if we would allow this argument to go further, then you could say, okay, also the single market of the European Union, the fact that we have a single market, have one currency, is also infringing the sovereignty of each member state in fiscal policies. But in that sense, the European Union in particular, and NATO for the military, the defense alliance, is an alliance where every member state is sharing responsibilities, is sharing a common understanding, which is why a violation of those shared principles, an attack from one NATO state on another, would be such a devastating outcome for the entire alliance.
Yeah. Well,
but I disagree that the positioning of foreign troops, especially in a NATO-EU context, is infringing the sovereignty of the single member state where these troops are positioned.
Yeah. Well, I understand that, absolutely. But then, of course, it's nothing to do with the European Union, because the European Union didn't even manage to have a common foreign and security policy, really, on behalf of the whole Union. That was an aim, of course, and it would be good to have that to happen, but it didn't happen yet. But then, of course, this is foreign troops in Germany and other countries is a question of NATO. But I mean, you have to put these dire issues on a table if you really take seriously strategic autonomy. And that's my point here. I don't know what is good. I mean, I don't want to speak anything on behalf of Germany. They will do their own decisions, and that's fine. But I'm only saying that if the European states, and of course it's the European Union, and that's a little bit the problem from the point of view of USA and also from the point of view of Russia and China, that there are two actors in a way, the European Union and NATO. And then there are sovereign states. And so that, and why in Europe, why don't we take it seriously that simply from the US perspective, for example, it's not easy to understand what is the European Union all about if it is not a sovereign state. And I mean, it's nothing to say that it's a bad format. I think it's a good format, but simply that it's not that clear, and even in Europe, it's not always clear what does it mean. And then there's all the time this kind of okay, what are the responsibilities of a single state and what are those of the European Union? And so and that's why I'm pointing that and thinking that how to really to make that strategic autonomy. And it is going to be different discussion and not easy way. But absolutely, then we have to be honest and put all the things on the table.
Yeah. I believe the current strategy goes towards a strategic autonomy of the entire European Union, of all 27 EU member states, and not 27 individual strategies for achieving strategic autonomy within those 27 states. I think that's the difference. But let's move again to the discussion regarding Greenland. Or Jens, sorry, did you want to comment on something?
I just had a little point or any question for you. The lack of European discussion, couldn't that also be the consequence of exactly the lack of will to do any kind of arbitration with Russia, as I just posed in regard to Greenland, that it is very hard for the European Union to do any kind of negotiation in this regard when the situation in Ukraine is like it is?
Well, of course, I mean, but they could do and they should do that a bit earlier, because I mean we have to remember that before the war really started, there were several negotiations going on, and even after, just after the war started, a couple of weeks after, there were really serious negotiations led by Turkey, and so that, and then we don't know yet all that what was there, but I mean what I have heard from American and Russian experts that it was rather close, but then there was some like okay, let's name them, USA and UK said that no, don't do that, because it's not you are going to, I mean, to the Ukrainians, that don't do that because you are going to do well and we will support you. And of course we don't know yet that what was the total truth there, and some day we will do that. But however, it means, I mean, negotiations are very complicated things. And you have to try again and again, because all the time you have to think about what's the alternative. It's a war. And if we will lose 1 week or 2 weeks more, I mean, who cares if the alternative is a war where people are killed, environment, built infrastructure is destroyed like we have seen. And this is my point. You have to have, I mean, strategy was mentioned. Strategy includes an exit. And I'm afraid like the current government in the USA does not have a strategy in Iran, for example, because they don't know how to get rid of there now. And that is, I'm afraid, also lacking in European politics. There should be always exit strategy, and strategy means that you can also prevent something.
Before we open the floor for questions from the audience, I have one more question to all three of you. When it comes to probably this aspect that you just mentioned, Lassi, to strategies, especially to strategies that we should take now to prevent a negative future outlook when it comes to Greenland. So my question is, what is your output, or your outlook on the future of the transatlantic relationship, especially with regards to Greenland? What do you expect will happen in the next couple of months, and how to strategically prepare for negative alternatives?
Everyone's looking at me.
If you want to go first, of course.
It's okay.
Kathrine, you can also go first. Whoever
Okay, they are
feels-
hesitating. I will go first.
Okay.
So, I mean, let Arctic cooperation to be continued. I mean, Greenland is part of the Kingdom of Denmark. Greenland has actually the chair of the Arctic Council today. So it would be really good to have that to be continued, and then try to go deeper and build exactly that trust. Because USA is there. US representative has to listen the Greenlandic chair. And so that this is, I would say, the best way to do. And it's also transatlantic, because there is not only the USA, but also Canada. And then there are the Nordic countries, and then there is Russia.
Yeah.
And it still is there, the framework, but it's not business as usual. But however, to keep it going.
I can be a little bit more specific in the question as well, maybe then it becomes more clear. I'm very interested in what we can do now to prevent the red line that we have discussed earlier, the red line from being crossed.
Yeah. As it is now, there are ongoing negotiations between the Kingdom of Denmark and the US, and on that ground, personally, I can only hope that that the red line will be kept up, that you will not that none of the elements of the Kingdom of Denmark will give in to any kind of way, any kind of surrendering sovereignty.
Yeah.
Because if we do that, we don't know where the red line is. So that, I think, is very important to keep that up. I think that I agree with Lassi that this is a matter of trying to get the forums to work and use them in the best kind of way. Also because that is what makes it possible to evolve some kind of opposition within the U.S. But our strongest card, as it is now, is that there are some kind of opposition in the U.S. against the present line, and we have to see how that evolves. But it is what Europe can do until then is to keep up the red line, because if that's fallen, if you can't discuss self-determination, if you can't discuss sovereignty, then all of our way of thinking of society and the world is at risk, and that is a problem.
Thank you.
I agree very much with both Lassi and Jens, and I also think it's very fortunate that Greenland right now has the chairship of the Arctic Council, which ICC actually was a co-founder of back then. And what Greenland and what we work for in the ICC is keeping up the diplomatic dialogues and sticking to the international laws and rules of diplomacy, also the unspoken rules of diplomacy. Then I hope that our world will not fall apart. our world in Greenland. I mean, yes.
Is there anything that, from your position of an advocate for the indigenous rights of the people of Greenland, that you would say is needed from Denmark, from the European Union?
Well, we work within the terms and rules of the UN also. So sticking to what the, for instance, Permanent Forum points out, and also the basic human rights, and that's why I when we started about an hour ago talked about that we have to remember that Greenland is not just a piece of land, but it is a home of a people. Yes.
Can I add to this? I also think that maybe one of the things that has not been explored or pointed out in sufficient kind of way is that, yeah, I grew up in the 90s and zeros, and that was a time when you talked about globalization and so on. But I think that it is actually also very important in order to understand ourselves as Democrats and so on, to understand how strong the national identity has, how strong that is, or anyway it could be. It is the national solidarity which has developed the idea of democracy, since there need to be some kind of populace. And it is the national solidarity which has developed welfare states and so on. And the strength in this is also worth emphasizing in this, because otherwise, the democratic world order can also, on that ground, what to call it, dissolve.
Thank you so much for all your input. I think we have covered a wide array of different topics. We have made basically a full circle of starting with Greenland as a home, and now also in your final words just a minute ago, you mentioned it once again. Dear audience, now it's the time for your questions. Please, we have one question here. We have a couple of colleagues who are coming with a microphone so we can hear you, and we will collect maybe 2-3 questions and then go back to the speakers. Please.
Okay, we're talking about what if the U.S. got Greenland, but let's go back to the motives. The elephant in the room, Mr. Trump. He stated 2 motives. Listening to Kathrine Bødker, I think the economic mineral investment incentive motive is not a real one, because as you've stated so clearly, Greenland is open for business, open for investment. So I think we can dismiss that. I don't know if Mr. Trump can dismiss that as an excuse, but that's another question to look what goes on inside his head. But then there's the question of national security, as from the U.S. point of view, which means who's the threat? Okay, I believe it's Russia. Is Russia really a threat at this point in time or in the near future? It can't even swallow Ukraine, which is a fraction of the size of the U.S., has a fraction of the armaments of the U.S. Okay, one could argue, go back to the icebreakers, 50-1, but still, is Russia really a threat? I'd love to hear the security experts weigh in on that. And then to maybe the question then, if it's not a threat, what are Trump's real motives here? I know we don't have any psychiatrists on the panel, but can anyone peer inside his head?
Yeah, thank you. There's another question here from the gentleman in the 3rd row.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would like to go back to the Inuit. Apart from this rhetoric and military aggression from White House and Kremlin, what do you think is more dangerous for the Inuit people in Greenland and in the other Alaska? And is it climate change, the effect of climate change, or is it even more dangerous, aggressive economic exploitation? I don't know what your Inuit friends in the Prudhoe Bay, what experience they have. And for Lassi, I mean, Finland is sitting very close to the military base in Murmansk, with all its environmental risks that come from there. And I don't know if Norilsk, the huge exploitation by Russia, if this is affecting the Arctic sensible environment.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And let's have one third question here in the back. We will also have time for a second round of questions.
So my question is addressing Dr. Lassi Heininen. You stated as long as foreign troops are stationed in Germany, they cannot have strategic autonomy. So I ask you, is strategic autonomy even achievable when the EU still relies on NATO? Because I would argue that the EU should work on Article 42.7 of the Lisbon Treaty, which is equal to Article 5 of NATO, and maybe work on an own military structure which would be similar to the NATO command structure. That's my first question. And I do have a second question, which I want to zoom out a little bit regarding the question, what if the US got Greenland? Do you believe there's a possibility that if the US gets Greenland, China would immediately, as a reaction, get Taiwan, and the case which of the 10 trillion economic damage would appear and the whole world would collapse?
Thank you. A couple of excellent questions, not very optimistic in their outlook, but that's why we are here to potentially also answer some elements of these questions. Who would like to start? Jens, you had already your hand up.
I can, as I said all the way in the beginning, the security argument is also also very bad. Not only because, regarding the security threat, I'm unsure. I can tell you that 10 years ago, people also talked about the Russian and the Chinese threat in Greenland. So this is not a new thing. Whether there's a reason for this, I cannot say. But anyway, this is not a new deal treating this threat. But what is even more important in this regard is that the most demilitarizing partner in the defense of Greenland is not Denmark, although we have seriously neglected to develop the military installations and so. But the U.S. have closed all their closed all 17 bases but one, and so they have drawn themselves out of Greenland militarily, and there's no problem, and that is the real frustration, I think, from a Danish point of view. There's no problem in developing the military installations, but because you can't do that in regard to the 1951 defense treaty. So the US can develop military installations. They can place them. They can place them almost wherever they want, and they are a part of the defense of Greenland is a common affair between the Kingdom of Denmark and the US. That is stated in the defense treaty. So therefore, this is not a real argument. They could develop their military installation if national security demanded it. So that is that is not a real argument. And the natural resources thing we have always already discussed. But I think that what's important here is that what is left, what is the reason, and it's very hard for me to see that this is not just power politics or kind of making a heritage or something like that with expanding the American territory.
If I can go back to the core of the question, which was also the motive, may I challenge you and also the others if you have any ideas? I mean, we are in the city of Vienna, in the city of psychoanalysis. What are the motives here?
Yeah. I think that very much behind there is that, and it's not only this, what Trump is saying, and he is not, of course, the first US president to say that. But I mean, particularly now, we know that this guy is a businessman, first of all, real estate mogul, etc., and very much supporting big oil and big tech, and now big military even. So, I mean, what if, I mean, now I'm speculating, what if behind this is simply that this is a trick to substitute for the pressure to do more to mitigate climate change and to stop mass-scale utilization of resources in the Arctic. Because remember, there are no any regulations for more strict environmental protection in the Arctic. There is no Arctic Treaty. It's up to national legislation. And who are the biggest oil producers among the Arctic states?
No.
Well, I mean, Russia, of course, we say Russia, but Norway, Canada, USA. And so we know that the current administration does not like that. More licenses are given for offshore oil drilling outside Alaska. And Norway, we have tried to say to our Norwegian friends, why don't you stop offshore oil drilling in the Arctic? You are the richest country in the world. You can do it. No, they don't even want to listen to that. They don't stop it. So what if this is the reason? Because now, like here in Vienna, we are talking about that thing. We are not talking about why this mass-scale utilization in the Arctic is continuing when the environment is so fragile. When the region is warming up 3 to 4 times faster than the rest of the world. And we are losing the only ocean with sea ice soon. We are losing big part of biodiversity. But we speak about this one issue.
Can I connect that probably to the question?
Yeah,
Sorry,
I was just going to say that leads me to answer the other question of what is more dangerous, the climate change or the economic exploitation. And to that question, I would like to say what Lassi just started saying, that the Arctic is getting warmer 3 times faster than the rest of the world, and it has been for years and years. So that is not a danger to us anymore. It is already a consequence of our culture and of our way of living and of how we can develop our society. It has been a consequence for years and years, and we have been talking about this, trying to get through to both stakeholders and governments and the world of this. So right now, the more dangerous threat is the economic exploitation, because the climate is already is already affecting our way of living and has done for decades. Yeah.
Just very briefly before we continue, Lassi, there was also the No, I think this was the only question to you. Sorry, I know that you wanted to go.
Yeah, because I have 2 other questions here. Absolutely.
Very briefly, because then we can have
don't be worried.
round.
Don't be worried. I mean, what is a threat? I mean, think about this. I'm one of those researchers who have done research on security and geopolitics. Usually they are separated, but they are two sides of the same coin. And threat picture is something what is very much used. But think about threat and risk. What is the difference? You can calculate a risk, but you cannot calculate a threat. It's very psychological. Again, we are in Vienna. So, and now, I mean, threat pictures, it's really something what is so much used, and should I say misused, to have media to report that this threat, China, Russia today, Iran earlier. So how come it is possible that Iran was threatening the national security of the USA? Please tell to me how it would be possible even. But that was in the rhetoric, and that was used. And so on. So, but I mean, this, we should be so much more careful with this. We should not accept threat pictures. They are very dangerous, because today, threat picture, then threat, then enemy picture, then enemy, then we are in a war. And we have seen that happening every now and then and again, but I'm so disappointed that it could happen again. But it's happening. So I don't think China is not a threat to Greenland. Russia is not a threat to Greenland. No. China is not even actively involved in the Arctic region today. They are concentrating on the Antarctic, etc. Forget whole thing. It's not a relevant thing at all. It's climate change. Climate change is the biggest security threat in the Arctic, absolutely. And the commander of the Norwegian army said that to me a few months ago. We agreed on this. It's climate change. So yeah, concentrate on that. But if you don't want to concentrate, like I said, it's a substitute for. Okay, then I have a question from you. You seem to know the agreements rather well. I don't know all them by heart, but however, yeah, I don't think that strategic autonomy is possible, like I said, and the problem is exactly that who is leading when you have the European Union and NATO together, because I mean most of the EU member states are also NATO member states, etc., etc. So I don't think so, and you have really to be. I mean, you have really to differentiate what is in the responsibilities of the EU and what are those of NATO. And what is left to NATO, it's very narrow. It's the military, nothing more. And then you should ask, is it needed? So I'm going I'm expecting very dear discussion about that if they really would like to, like we discussed earlier, to clarify what is strategic autonomy.
We have time for very
okay.
briefly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'll try. It's because I didn't get the chance to psychologize over Trump, and I actually found it an interesting task. Also because my field is 19th century history, and what I have actually what I have actually worked with is the idea that victory and expansion can compensate for the lack of democratic legitimacy. It is seen rather often in 19th century Europe with Napoleon III and Bismarck and Nicholas II in Russia in the beginning of the First World War II. And I think that is a deal that we have forgotten. We have maybe overlooked that possibility, because I actually also think that is what is quite scary about Putin, because if he wins, if he gains territory, he can use this for legitimizing his own government. And then there is the small thing that Trump is often talking about being the best president, very often, and he's very confident that he is the one. And I think that if you look at it, what is the only certain way to get a heritage in as an American president? That is actually expansion. Then you will have with certainty written you into the history books. Yeah. And that I also think is, could be a deal. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Thank you. No, thank you.
Yeah, but very short comment to that, because we should be careful not to personalize politics too much.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I have a small comment to Lassi's last comment about what is most dangerous, the climate change or what. And I think even though we sound maybe to not agree, we actually agree, because it's not the climate change in itself, but all the ideas that come from the climate change that is the most dangerous. Yes, that's what I wanted to state.
Yeah, climate change as a security issue.
Yes.
That's the point.
Yeah.
We have time for 2 short questions. There's a gentleman in the very back here.
Yes, my question is mainly directed to Kathrine. In this ongoing debate that's going on between between Europe and the U.S. and all the other interests, Greenland has a unique opportunity to exert their independence drive quickly and to a quick end, and to the benefit of Greenlanders. They have the opportunity to create independence and determine their own destiny and make Greenland a wealthy nation like Norway has done with resources if it's managed correctly. Do the Greenlanders have the capability and mindset to do this? And my second quick question is sort of a negative question, but did the Danish sterilization and forced birth control program of the 60s through the 90s affect the mentality of especially women in Greenland today in this debate in any way? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And there's one more question here in the center.
Yeah, thank you. My question is regarding the United Kingdom. So in what way could the UK serve as a kind of balancing actor between Greenland, foremost the US and Europe, and potentially also Russia, play in the North Atlantic security? So, for example, I think the so-called GI-UK gap. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Unfortunately, we don't have time for more questions. However, we have a reception with an opportunity to ask more questions to the speakers over a glass of wine afterwards. So I would love to wrap up the discussion here on the panel, the formal part, and then more quickly move to the informal part and engage in a bilateral conversation afterwards. But Kathrine, the first one was directed to you.
Thank you. As we talked about earlier this evening, Greenland has had self-government since 2009, and in this law, we called it the self-government law. We have had the opportunity to get independent whenever we want. So since 2009, it has been a possibility for the Greenlandic society to get independent. But what I want to say in this discussion is, how do we define the independence? What is it that we mean when we say we want to become independent, and what is it the rest of the world or other places of the world understands by independent? And if we listen to what our government has been saying for the last year and a half, it is what we mean by independent is the self-determination of how is it we want to develop our society. And so in that sense, the independence that we are seeking is not to cut all connections to be part of the Danish kingdom. That is not what we mean when we say we want to be independent. We want to determine how is it that we want to develop our nation, and how is it that we want to operate in the world. It is not that we are cutting our ties to a common history that has been shaped for the last more than 300 years. So our definition of independence is probably a lot different than what people think they hear when we say we want to become independent.
Mm-hmm. Jens, do you have any final remarks? Of course,
no.
Also to you, Lassi, but
no about Greenland. But
not about the other. Okay. But about Greenland, about what
you asked one more question about the sterilization. Yeah. Well, that topic is still an open wound. The report of the investigation of everything has not been published yet. So I can only report of what I experienced. I was not part of the project. I'm too young, even though I'm more than 50. I was too young to be in that program. But there were many cases, and there were no. The big case is the IUD is not the forced sterilization. So I think that happened in other places of where Inuit has been colonized, but it didn't happen in a big scale and was not a project sterilization in Greenland. It was the IUD, and yes, it affects many women, and it affects how women view themselves and how women how do you say that? The women, the identity as a woman, and how and what role in the society we play when we cannot give birth to children and we don't know why, of course.
I have a short. I think, however, that you asked if it influences. I think that there are a great agreement in Greenland and in Denmark in regard to that the Danish-Greenlandic relationship is a matter for Denmark and Greenland, which has nothing to do with the U.S. So whether it comes into this, I actually don't even think from either side actually. So it has nothing to do with the U.S. anyway. No.
Lassi, you have the last word.
Thank you. Thank you for the question about United Kingdom. UK could play a role here. But first, they have to clean up the mess in the domestic politics, which has actually been continued for years. I mean, if there will be a new prime minister, I don't know how many it is, maybe seven within the last 5 years or so.
6 and counting.
Exactly. And then another obstacle, and that is the special relationship with the USA. So particularly the UK governments, it doesn't matter from which party the prime minister is coming. It's always there that is a special case and so on. So that might be obstacle or problem. But then there is another issue when it comes to Greenland. I mean, how credible mediator UK is there? Because remember one thing, I said that there are no armed conflicts after the end of the Second World War, but there have been 3 wars in the Arctic between UK and Iceland. Yeah, exactly, the so-called Cod Wars. But I mean, they were not really armed conflicts, but they were something not that nice. And Icelanders, very much depending on fisheries, didn't like the fact that UK trawlers are coming too close, and etc., etc. That's why 3 Cod Wars. So the reputation of UK after that has not been that good in Iceland, and the same is in Greenland, by the way. But the funny thing is that those who know the details of UNCLOS, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Seas, they know that there is this kind of 200 nautical miles exclusive economic zone. That is because of Iceland. Because of Iceland, after these Cold Wars, Iceland said that no, 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 no. We are going to do so that you are not coming anymore to our waters. And they were very, very successful. And now it is 200 nautical miles. And when you might remember when there was this corruption in Iceland, was it 15 years ago or so? Yeah, and aviation traffic in Europe was closed. I went rather soon after that to Iceland. I saw one T-shirt. It was written that we ask cash, not ash. and that because there was before that bank problem when the Icelanders were trying to buy some European banks and Nordic banks and so on. So there is these problems that how credible mediator UK is there. But on the other hand, the UK has been actively doing research in the Arctic. It is an observer state of the Arctic Council and member state of the Arctic and International Arctic Science Committee, etc., etc. So there is potential.
Unfortunately, Caroline from the UK couldn't join us today. Otherwise, she would have been also perfectly equipped to answer that question. But that means only that I believe the discussion is so important that we have to continue it also in the future, also inviting other guests like from the UK. Very, yeah.
Could I just add
very briefly, yeah, of course. Of course.
Ambassador, the UK and Norway are actively developing intense cooperation to deal with the Russian threat in the Arctic. There's a joint program to strengthen the two navies. The Norwegians are buying 5 frigates, and during the Cold War, the UK's main focus was on the defense of the Arctic against the Soviet threat.
Okay.
And that's going to come into play again in the period ahead.
Yeah. Thank you.
And by the way, that's why they occupied Iceland.
During World War II.
Yeah, exactly.
So we see there is a lot of appetite for more discussion indeed. I hope there's also some appetite for a glass of wine, because I would definitely love to invite all of you to join us for this small reception that we have provided just in the room next door. First of all, however, a big hand of applause to all of our speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you.